Welcome to Take Noise Podcast, Muscle Shoals Storyteller Series. I'm Grant Walden.
I'm Dan Williams.
I'm Dick Cooper.
He didn't miss a beat.
He didn't miss a beat. He's worked radio before. He knows how this is done. Thanks, Dick, for joining us. This is awesome. Been looking forward to this for a while. You've done a myriad of things in the industry, photography and name it. I'll just let you tell.
It's hard to keep a job.
Yeah, how much of that jumping
things
around was one project just naturally came to an end and you said, well, there's bills got to be paid and I got to go to work? I mean, how much of it was just trying to find the next thing?
Yeah, I had a wife and a kid and a car payment and a house, and I was trying to make my payments on time. And I did sometimes.
Every once in a while, right? I think a lot of people listening can relate to that. So.
Well, there's a lot of things I would like to ask you, but in simplest terms, how would you describe yourself to someone that has never met or doesn't know anything about you?
Well, I came here as a journalist. I came here in March of '72, and I went to work for the paper and didn't really know very much about the industry that was here. I had heard that they made music over here, but that was about it. And one of the requirements for reporters at the Florence Times Tri-Cities Daily, that we each had to have a feature story for the Sunday paper, and it had to be turned in by noon Thursday so that it would go into the pages that were printed before Sunday. And on Wednesday, I'm sitting at my desk pulling my hair out because I don't know anything about this town. I don't know pretty much what to write about. And one of the photographers, Rayburn Sparks, is about to leave. He's getting off work. And he comes over and asks me what's wrong. So I tell him, I don't know anything about this town. I got to come up with a feature story. He says, well, you want to go to a session? And I said, what's that? He took me to Fame, and I watched Mike Davis cut Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me, which was later a #1 record.
That just goes to show you never know where something will come from in the most odd moment.
Yeah. And
that's cool.
A few weeks later, I reached this understanding that if I started a weekly music column, it took care of my feature requirement for Sunday and also gave me a license to hang out in the studios.
There you go. That's a win-win.
Yeah. Basically, what really brought me to that point was talking with Jerry Masters there was a press conference at the airport. They were once again changing the airline schedule and trying to get people to fly out of here. And he had been there to talk about the needs of the music industry. And we'd gotten talking. He took me back to the studio, and that was the first time I'd ever been able to get into the control room at Muscle Shoals Sound. He took me there. Before that, when I was doing the column, I had to go talk to Diane or Carol, the two secretaries, and they'd tell me what was happening, but they wouldn't let me in. And then once I became friends with Jerry Masters, then I had basically an all-access pass from that point on.
That's cool. So you said you didn't know much about the town. Where were you originally from?
I was originally from Birmingham, and I'd worked for the Birmingham Post-Herald, and then I was a general assignment reporter down there. And Winford Turner had come down. Winford was a managing editor to the Decatur Daily. He'd come down and offered me a job as science and education writer with the Decatur Daily covering NASA and the first moon launch.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's a conversation we had several months ago about, didn't you get a chance to speak with Werner von Braun?
Yeah, I did, and I actually have a copy of a book, Footprints on the Moon, that he's autographed for me.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah,
That wasn't his book. That was what was so weird.
Oh.
It was the Associated Press's book about the moon landing.
What was his thoughts about it, or did he offer?
He was a little reluctant, to be honest. I think he wanted me to buy his book so he could sign it. But he did sign it for me.
Well, did you guys have much chance to talk one-on-one, or?
Not all that much, really. They had several press conferences, and they would have these conferences over there at NASA where they would have different scientists and different parts of the project at different tables, and the press would come in, and then you could go to each one and talk to whoever. I was interested in the scientists that worked at NASA but were living in Decatur primarily, but I did interview some of the bigger names like Bob Brown. And then in I ended up getting divorced in 72, but back in the fall of 71, Pete Kelly had become the city editor of the Florence Times, and we had worked together at NASA. He had covered NASA for the Florence Times Tri-Cities Daily, and he'd offered me a job in like October, and I turned it down because by then I was state editor of the Decatur Daily, and everything was going well. But by February, my marriage was in the toilet, and all our friends had gotten involved, and I wanted to leave that town and never see those streets again. And the only place I knew
I know
could
that feeling. I'm from there.
I was about to say, I think you're like a Decatur refugee, aren't you?
That is a great description.
Yeah.
There's good people there. There's good memories that I have, but I want them to stay that way.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the only place I knew I could quit on a Friday and go to work on Monday was over here because Pete had offered me a job in the fall, and I turned it down. I called him up after I got divorced, and I asked him if that job was still open, and he said, "For you, it is."
Dude, that's awesome. I mean, how often do you walk into a job on the leave? I mean, that doesn't happen. That's awesome.
Luck counts.
Yeah. Also, there's a lot to be said on you following up on something that, somebody had made you an offer before and just like, you know what, this offer might still stand. That's awesome.
I mean, I was just desperate. I wanted out of that town. And so I came over here, and then, of course, the first week, I ended up going to Fame and seeing that session with Rick and Mac Davis, and that intrigued me. And then I started really digging in to find out what had gone on, and then I met Jerry Masters, and Jerry was... he and I became real good friends. We did a lot of motorcycle racing together. His book, Hanging by My Knees from the Tree, it talks about this one race we were in up on LaGrange Mountain, and he's coming in towards the finish line, and he gets stuck in a mud puddle, and I went past him and crossed the finish line and came back and helped him get his bike out of the mud. And he was upset with me because I didn't stop and help him get out of the mud. But I finished the race first, then I came and helped.
Yeah, no, I mean, you had your priorities.
Yeah,
Right. He was
we
still
have
gonna
our
be there.
priorities,
I mean, he obviously wasn't going anywhere, right? So you knew where to
Got
find
a
him.
point.
But yeah, Jerry was a great friend, still is for that
Jerry's
matter.
a great guy. I hope to get him on the podcast too. He's a dear person. Just
Yeah.
sweet.
And he was very, very helpful to me. And by him accepting me as a human being and friend, a lot of other people in the music industry were more willing to do that.
Now, what year would this have probably been at Fame, the Baby Get Hooked on Me, or Baby Don't Get Hooked on Me?
It was late March of 72.
Okay, that's earlier than I thought it was. I thought that was closer to the late 70s song. I didn't realize
I
that.
got divorced February the 28th of 72, and I moved over here the next week, and then it was at the end of that week.
There you go. That's a life story for you. I find it really interesting. You went from doing journalism with NASA to music. I mean, before we move forward, do you have a really interesting story that you could share from the NASA days?
Not really, because it was very stylized. You would go to these press conferences and you'd have to go from table to table to talk to these different scientists and whatnot. And, that I did make friends with Pete Kelly at that point in time because he was covering for the Florence paper, and we got to where we'd have lunch a couple of times. But for the most part, it was like any other press conference, it was real sterilized. Of course, getting into the music business was totally removed from that. And I didn't at first understand the technology. I didn't understand the language of the industry. And it took me a while to get beyond that. But, people were willing to talk. And I guess to some degree my personality helped. I made friends with the right people. I made friends with Johnny Weicker. And
Well, I was going to ask you about him.
The very
in the
first
Decatur
music
area.
column I did was an interview with Weicker. He came back from the first story I did was just a feature story about Mac Davis. But when I started the column, Weicker had just come back from the Sailcat tour, and he was the first person I interviewed for the column.
Johnny was a good friend. He tripped me out. I used to work at Emeron Music in downtown Decatur across from the Princess Theater on 2nd Avenue. I was there 3 years, assistant manager. But he would come in every once in a blue moon, and you would hear him before you saw him. Because he had this little scooter, moped type scooter thing that he had cans tied on the back of it, the just got married cans, like you'd see people driving away from a wedding. and he had like a trombone welded to it, and yeah, it was the craziest thing. And he would, yeah,
Weicker taught me about showbiz. It's what you show that counts.
It
Yeah.
sounds like he believed it.
yeah. Well, I mean, he was on American Bandstand and all that stuff. He,
And intentionally dropped his guitar in the middle of the song. If you'll watch that show, he's hitting the button, hitting the strap where it buttons onto the guitar with his elbow, and then finally breaks it loose, and he's holding the neck, and it lets it swing out, and swings it back up, and catches it under his arm, and he's pantomiming the song. So, yeah.
So he could
That's
get away
interesting.
with that.
You guys had what was the Mighty Field Division? Was
Yes,
you?
me and
Your
Weicker.
pairing, right?
Yeah.
The main focus of that wasn't that to do with Eddie Hinton and all of his music. and things?
Basically, that was put together to try to get Eddie some money. Because
Right.
there was a lot of stuff that Eddie had done that was on tapes that were stored in his garage of his ex-wife and things like
Ooh,
that.
yeah.
But Eddie was financially destitute. He was at one point he had a job as a watchman at a repo trailer place, and he was sleeping. He would roll back the carpet on the floor of the trailer and sleep under it on the bare floor.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is the guy who wrote "Cover Me" and God, what else? I mean, like
Just a bunch of stuff.
huge Muscle Shoals songwriter, extremely stupid, talented guitarist.
But he was a troubled soul if there ever was one. He really was. I went over to when I was trying to work with him, and I was his manager for like a couple of years, and without question, the hardest thing I ever tried to do was try to manage Eddie. But he was a very troubled soul. He would do things to just intentionally destroy whatever you were trying to put together. When we were putting the record together, Very Extremely Dangerous, I went to shoot the photo for the cover shot, and when I get there, he's got this really nasty T-shirt with stains all over it and whatnot. So I had been up to Nashville the week before to Welk Music looking for some songs from Barry Beckett, and they'd given me a Lawrence Welk Summer Tour T-shirt, and so I swapped T-shirts with Eddie to take the photo. The photo wasn't ever used. I still have it though, but it was
That's
pretty funny
hilarious.
with Eddie in a Lawrence Welk shirt.
Yeah, well, see, I've only recently, in the past couple of years, become hip to his music, and it's just like, wow, holy crap, this is amazing. And it's like, not a lot of people know about Johnny Weicker, but those that know. The best way I could describe him is he was truly an artist in every sense of the word. He would give you the shirt off his back,
Oh, yeah.
He was an extremely kind guy, and
he was, his family was very wealthy. They were involved in the banking business there in Decatur. And
well, they owned Weicher's Toys down on Bank Street. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they were
Weicker Hardware before that.
Yeah, that's true. So they were loaded, and here he comes riding down. I mean, that's what makes it so funny.
Yeah, oh God, there's a whole array of stories about Weicker. When John Prine came here and cut Storm Windows album, we had a day off in the summer. I mean, in the weekend, and so I took him to Decatur so we could go out on Weicker's boat. And Johnny is a great guy. I never see him in an argument with anybody or anything. But that particular day, it's me and John and Weicker, and we're coming out of the boat harbor. And Weicker sees this guy that he's got some kind of problem with. And so we're still in the entryway to the boat harbor. He's got this twin outboard sea camper. He rotates the wheel all the way over, jumps off the boat, gets into a fight with this guy, and we do a circle in the entry to the harbor, and we come back by. He's already beat the guy up. He jumps back on the boat. And we go up under the interstate bridge, and Prine told me later, he says, every time the bus crosses that bridge, I have to tell everybody in the band that story.
That is so funny. Wow.
It's efficient too.
Well, like Scott Boyer and he was a dear friend. We wrote several songs together, and he and I wrote a song about Johnny Weicker that's called Long Hair Ain't Enough Anymore. And we got to talking one day, and I don't really know how the conversation came about, but we were talking about different quirky things. And I actually think part of it was a story that Tommy Talton shared about him walking to the door and like had all these streamers in his hair and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, long hair ain't enough anymore. And really that's a pretty deep statement actually if you think about it. But he would always come out with those little things. I mean, I remember one time, it was a couple times, we were sitting at Emerald Music. He would get the resonator guitar out or something off of the shelf and tune it like to open D and like, this is what, Keith Richards showed me. And he's like, hey, grab that mandolin. And we'd sit there and jam somewhere on an old cell phone. I've got a recording of us sitting around playing something.
I tell you, one of my favorite Weicker stories was when he got his first royalty check from Sailcat, Motorcycle Mama album. It was about $35,000, I think, and he went to the bank to cash it, and none of the banks in town could cash it. They didn't have the money.
Yeah.
So he went over he had a white Cadillac then. So he goes over to Huntsville, and on his way over to Huntsville, he's going through Rogersville, and there's a boat sales place there that out front had this twin inboard Volvo Sea Camper that he bought. Well, anyway, he goes and gets cash, and he comes back, and he's in a pair of cutoffs and a T-shirt, and he's driving this ratty old Cadillac, and he comes in there, and he's looking around. So they're not ignoring him. And finally, he gets the guy's attention. He takes him out there. So how much for that boat there? And the guy said, like $25,000. He said, okay, how about sending it down to my house? And he starts giving him the address. And he says, well, how much you going to put down? He says, put down? Yeah, he said, how much you going to put down? And he gives him $25,000 and buys it.
That's fun.
And I bet that guy's still telling that story. If he's still living, I bet he's still. Well, I mean, how often does somebody just come into your dealership and say, $25,000, cold hard cash, send that boat to my house?
Well, he really was taking off on an Eddie Hinton story because Eddie did it. He bought a purple Bonneville, I think it was, or maybe it was something like that, down at one of the dealers in Sheffield, right there off the bridge, that car dealer. And they were telling him he still had to put so much down because he wanted it a purple one. And it was custom color and everything. And he just paid cash for it, too. But some Weicker just wasn't going to be outdone.
That sounds about right.
How much use did he get out of that boat? Or did it just sit there?
Didn't he have a houseboat?
It was a sea camper.
Yeah. It's the same thing. He had that.
Yeah, forever.
Okay.
Actually, Eddie Hinton lived in it for a while, sitting on a trailer in back of Weicker Hardware.
Yeah.
So he really got.
Yeah, he got his money's worth out of that thing. So it really wasn't a bad investment, actually. I mean, it seems like it at the time, but he got his money's worth.
That guy's a hell of an impulse buy. I can't get over it.
I tell you one thing about that boat: you can have more fun than the law allowed on it.
Oh man! Speaking of which, you worked with Lynard Skynard too, didn't you?
Yeah, kind of. I have a kind of a bizarre relationship with those guys because the very first show I promoted was Lynard Skynard show at Florence Lauderdale Coliseum, April 22nd of 1974. This was after I was doing my music column. I had gone in November to see Jimmy Johnson to do my column, and he said, man, I got to play you this song these guys down that we know just wrote about us. And so he plays me this song called Sweet Home Alabama. Hadn't been released yet. But anyway, I'd been talking with a couple of guys about doing some promotions, and I go back to them and say, listen, here's what we need to start with. And so we called Brusco Management over in Atlanta and booked Skynard for $3,500 to come play in April. This was in November that we booked him. Well, this is before Sweet Home Alabama came out in January on the Second Helping album. Mm-hmm. And so they were making $3,500 a night. We booked them. We sent $1,750 deposit and had a signed contract. Well, it rolls around to April, and Sweet Home Alabama's gone through the roof, and they're getting, I think, $6,000 or $7,000 a night at this point. So I go over to the Coliseum, and when they drive up, and I go out and introduce myself, tell them who I am, what I am, and that I'll pay them the remainder of the contract at the end of the night. And Ronnie gets really angry because, they're making a lot more than that now,
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, I do have a contract, I do have a deposit, and he's going to whip my ass.
That's the story I've heard a lot about him. He just wanted to fight even if he wasn't mad at you.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Avondale, in Birmingham,
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
It wasn't like I was particularly upset about this little short guy that was going to whoop my ass. And I just proceeded to show him the contract and the advance, the receipt for the advance. And I said, you're getting $1,750 this evening, and that's all. He was stomping mad, and he wasn't going to play, and then finally cooler heads prevailed, and they did a really good show, and it was a sellout, obviously, since, they were so hot right then. But it rocked along. And then later on, when I started working with Pete Carr and Lenny LeBlanc, we were the opening act for Skynard in 77. We did a warm-up show in Statesboro, Georgia, and then we went down to Miami and did the Sportatorium, and then we went across to St. Pete and did a show. Then we went to Lakeland and did a show. And then they flew from Lakeland to Greenville, South Carolina, to do a show, but it was really, and then they were going to Baton Rouge, and it was really impossible for us to drive to Greenville and then to Baton Rouge and make the connection happen. But Lenny and Pete were from Daytona, so we went into Daytona before, the same night they did Greenville, we did Daytona, a homecoming show for them. And we were driving to Baton Rouge, and when they were flying and the plane crashed.
Oh, wow.
We were, according to what I was told at the time of the crash was, we were in Pascagoula eating dinner when the plane went down at McCombs.
Oh, wow.
But we didn't find out about it until we got to Baton Rouge. Eddie Struzik and I think it was Pete were writing a song, so we were in the car, and so we weren't listening to the radio. And when I get to the hotel and I'm sat in the register, the woman, she says, "Oh, by the way, your show's been canceled." And I looked up at her and said, "What? Why?" She says, "Because of the plane crash, of course." And
That's a way to find out, I guess. Yeah.
Wow.
I kind of walked out and laid across the hood of the car and started trying to figure out what the hell do we do next, and then we ended up getting abandoned by the management company. We'd pretty much expended what money we had getting there to Baton Rouge. And then the management company, which is also Skinner's management company, they do what they need to do. They go to Mississippi to take care of the people who survived the crash, and they forgot about us. And we literally didn't have enough money for gas to get home. So it was like 2-3 days before somebody said, "Oh, what about those other guys, And then we finally come back home. Now, we'd been booked for 30 days. This is from October to New Year's. All of a sudden, we got no more dates. And there's no way to get new dates in that time frame. So everybody's scrambling around trying to find a place to get some money to pay their bills and whatnot.
Yeah. But
we regrouped and came out after the first of the year, went out with Journey and some people like that. And it all did quite well there for a while.
I got to ask a quick question right here. It's the album they were promoting at that time. It was Street Survivor, right?
That's correct.
How did you feel about the initial album cover and then the reissued album cover? How did you? Did you think anything about it?
Covers. Yeah.
Okay. I just wondered because
I can understand their desire to take the flames out.
Yeah.
Really and truly, it's not so much for the people that got killed; it's for the people who were left. Their parents,
right.
Their wives and children and.
I just wondered, what kind of discussion went into that? Was it a no-brainer? Oh, this is not going to work?
Well, I mean, I don't really know who made the decision on that, whether it was a record company, the management company, or who. But, it's certainly understandable. And then, I went back out with them on the reunion tour. I was the road manager for Gary's band, Rossington. And, Jimmy Johnson was mixing that, and Jay Johnson was playing guitar on that tour. And that was an interesting tour to be on.
Skynard's First and Last, the early stuff that was done, the demo type stuff that was done in Muscle Shoals, not the versions everybody's heard. Well, they've heard it now. Jerry Masters told me that Skynard's First and Last was recorded in Studio B here, just across the hall. It wasn't recorded, it was mixed, excuse me.
It was mixed, and they did some overdubs. Not sure whether those were overdoses were in A or B. They probably were in B, but I'm not certain of that.
Okay, so that's just further confirmation that did happen. So
that's
were you
pretty
around
cool.
any of that down here when that was going on? Or?
I was working for Barry, and I forget what project we were on. We had one going in one studio, and Jimmy had that one going in the other.
Right. That's interesting because that was the stuff that was, if I'm right about this, that was it. That was all they were going to release. This is the first, this is the last, thus the title. Here it is. We've already done this. Mm-hmm. We're going to put it out, and we're not going to do a reunion, whatever thing.
Yeah. I don't. I wasn't directly involved in that, so
Okay,
I can't really say.
Sure, no.
Yeah, I was just curious because it's one of those things. It's a pivotal point in history, and definitely the part about the plane crash thing. You don't really think about the other side of that, where you've got opening acts and all these other people involved. Your sound and lighting crew, your motels that are booked, and that's a lot that goes into that. And not only would it be difficult for you guys to find venues and book enough time to promote, but also there's these venues that are like, we were counting on this and nothing.
One of the things that we did.
That sounds kind of callous because the guys died in a plane crash, but it does. I guess what I'm saying is it affects way more people than you would think it would affect.
We, of course, we're going into Christmas. This is October when the plane crashes. We're heading into Christmas. We have no work.
And that really, really just plain sucks.
And so I put together a show at the Florence Lauderdale Coliseum, just basically to make Christmas money for the band, and that we all share it equally.
And that's got to be hard. A lot of people, listening, I think a lot of people have this idea about the music industry that it's, once you're out there performing, that's it. You've made it, quote unquote. So now they don't think about, the poor opening band that all of a sudden their income for the next month is gone. And I don't know about you guys, but if I found out I wasn't getting paid for a month, I'd be in trouble.
Well, at the same time, here Pete Carr and Lenny LeBlanc they're opening for Lynard Skynard.
Yeah.
Come on.
So it's not like... And
this isn't in 72, 74, a lot of really big hits. This is after Free Bird, and this is it. This is...
The big time.
Yeah, this is it. And if you're opening for that band, not only are you good enough to be doing it, but you're one step away from being that big opening act yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And
so...
Again, you probably just...
The music business is one of these businesses you can get rich quick, but you can also go broke quick.
Yeah. And that's a lot of businesses, but the music business is definitely one that seems to happen probably.
And it doesn't have to be your fault either.
No.
The band I'm playing with now, we had a national tour put together this coming up June 2019. And I guess that's not happening now because our management company, they were based out of Orlando, Florida, and we didn't even we talked to our, I don't want to say agent, but the guy we were working with at the company, our connection there, on Tuesday, and on Friday we got a notice that the company had dissolved and we needed to file.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, this happened several months ago. I was really depressed and didn't talk about music for like a month.
Okay, that explains a lot.
No, we found out overnight, and they said, well, any dates will be honored. Of course, by the time they dissolved, we were still 8 months out, so there was like one date on the book, and it's like, we're not going to...
You guys were going to Europe, too, at some point.
This was that same company, yeah.
Oh, God.
And they just... Boop,
wow, okay.
And they weren't a fly-by-night operation. They'd been around for 30 years.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This was a reputable...
And they just gone.
Yeah, it wasn't just some shoestring business out of a dude's basement. This was a legit thing. Wow, that sucks. I'm sorry.
No, it is what it is.
Well, moving on to other Southern rock, you had a huge relationship and still do with the guys from the Drive-By Truckers.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
You care to talk about any of that? Jason Isbell's friends with everybody's here. Patterson Hood. Everybody knows everybody, and
Patterson is David Hood's son,
right?
And I've known Patterson since he was 9 years old, and he started. I was running a publishing company here after Beckett had gone to Nashville, and Patterson would bring me songs from time to time to listen to, and I was very encouraging of him and whatnot. whatnot. And the Adams House Cat was happening at that time later on, and I was a big backer of them. And then when the Truckers came around, they had tried a couple of times to cut Southern Rock Opera, and it just really never quite happened. And so they asked me if I would get involved, and we did it. I guess we did it as wrong as you could possibly do. A record, we cut it in the middle of the summer in a warehouse on the top of a building in downtown Birmingham that Cooley's mother-in-law owned, in the middle of the night because the people downstairs couldn't work if we were making noise upstairs. And, we took a Tascam 8-track that Earl Hicks owned and cut it on that, which was not exactly top-of-the-line gear. And we got a top 10 record in Rolling Stone.
But that, to me, in retrospect, was the perfect and only way that record could have been cut.
Yeah, you couldn't have got anybody to pay you to cut it.
No. Well, but I guess what I'm saying is the way that record translates.
It has a quality.
It has a quality to it that is so honest. And I think that's what resonated with people. I think the Truckers, to me, not only is Patterson and Cooley, but especially Patterson, just an excellent, excellent storyteller. I mean, that to me, I would like to read books if the guy would write them.
Patterson is kind of like my kid that I never had. Before we actually got the record done, Patterson would come through town and he would stay at my house. He'd sleep on the floor, sleep on the couch, whatever the case happened to be. Jason Isbell had been in a band. I was living in a house with Scott Boyer and Shauna Tucker. It was a 3-story A-frame out on Shoals Creek.
Yeah, Scott told me about that. He was actually looking at about a year or two before he passed away, so that they'd put it up for sale again, or that they had put it up for rent or something again.
Yeah,
Am I right about that?
It was up for sale for a long time. I don't know whether they ever did or not. But anyway, this was a wonderful house as far as musicians were concerned. Bobby Whitlock from Derek and the Dominoes lived down at the bottom of the hill, and he was through there from time to time. Actually, Bobby Whitlock's the one that made me pay attention to Jason Isbell, because Jason had been in a band with Shauna before he went off to Memphis to go to school. And then when he came back, he was like hanging out at the house and sleeping on the couch, and he was just another one of the kids that came through, kind of thing there for a while. And then one day Whitlock comes up, which he was there quite often, and he goes through and he picks up a guitar and goes out on the deck, and he's just sitting out there looking at the water playing, and Jason sees him out there and grabs up another guitar and goes out there, and they sit on the bench, and so they start playing, and Whitlock's egging him on, and finally it gets to Jason's right there with him, and Whitlock's getting a little antsy about this, so he goes to Thorn Tree on the Garden, which is the last song on Derek and the Dominoes, and it's kind of a quirky song, you know. Yeah. And Jason just powers right through behind him. Whitlock gets up, puts the guitar down, and says, "I can't beat him," and walks away.
See, Jason I will rank him as one of the top guitar players in the world. People don't really realize. I mean, he's getting more recognition for it now, I think, due to his social media presence, because you'll see him play a little ditty on Instagram or something here and there, and it's like, whoa, that's really cool. But I mean, I've always thought of him as a guitar player. I mean, he's an excellent songwriter, and I love to hear him sing. But oh my God, at guitar, it's like you see him and Kelvin and Will and those guys, like Christmas parties or something where nobody's really trying to really impress anybody. They're just all having fun, and they might have a little competition trying to one-up each other with their licks or something. That is like, oh my God, that's freaking amazing.
Yeah, he just bought Ed King's
I saw that. That's kind of what I was talking about with Instagram. He got the Les Paul that, have you seen this? That Simple Man was written on and all.
Oh, wait, maybe I did.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, I'm glad he ended up with that too, because someone like him needs to have that guitar. That guitar needs to tell more stories.
Yeah. It's
got more songs in it that need to be written, in my opinion, that the world needs to hear. I feel Ed would be happy about that.
I think so too. But Jason was, he was just literally, I think, still a teenager when he started hanging out there at house. I think he was about 18 or 19. And the way he got into the truckers is kind of an interesting story. I was, pushing the band as hard as I could, and I had this deal where there was a place here in town there was the Brindley Brothers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I had a gig there
place
for them, and I called Spin and Rolling Stone, I think it was. I got writers to come in to hear that show. And like 3 days before the show, the IRS came in and shut it down.
Yep.
And there's no other venue in town, and I'm freaking out.
That sucked. They had good pasta and great music.
Yeah. And so
It was
anyway,
on Florence Boulevard, across from.
the old Sears Beer.
Yes.
News to me. I had no idea.
Yeah. Really cool place. Anyway. Sorry.
Anyway, so the only thing I can think of is to do a house party at the house. We had like 35 people, and Jason's sitting back there in the audience, and the guitar player Rob Malone doesn't show because he doesn't want to be seen in that situation, having the band not in a club like it was originally decided. And so they played a set without him. There was 5 chairs set up on one end of the room, and 4 guys, because Rob doesn't show. So then they play a set, they take a break. Patterson asks Jason, you want to sit in? And so he does. And the next day he got in the van and went to Oklahoma with him and was with him for 5 or 6 years before he went off on his own. But, he was so great and so perfect for that band. And his songs were so perfect for that band.
Yep.
That, it was a great situation. And, things happen the way they're supposed to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I find that to be, I don't know, I mean, it's just like his whole solo career and Patterson's solo career wouldn't have happened the way it's happened, I don't think, had all that stuff just not aligned. I mean, that's anything, but, I mean, I don't know.
Well, I tell you that tour, Jason, like I say, got in the van and went to Oklahoma with him. I ended up flying to Dallas and joining them 3 days later, and then we did 72,000 miles in that Dodge van with 6 people and all our gear and all our instruments and 200 plus shows, and broke the records. We did a couple of trips to Europe.
It's awesome.
So yeah, big thanks to Dick Cooper for coming by. It was awesome. You guys just listened to the first half of the episode. We've got the back half of it coming out in 2 weeks, so make sure you come back, check it out. I think you'll enjoy everything Dick's got to say. It's a real interesting perspective.
He definitely sees everything through a different lens, being that he's a photographer, so pun intended.
That's terrible.
But I've known Dick for several years, and he's been heavily involved in the Muscle Shoals music scene for a few decades.
And just a really nice guy,
yeah,
too. It was a
really
pleasure.
nice guy, very knowledgeable. So, yeah, come see us again in the next 2 weeks and catch the back half of this interview. And thanks for listening.
Be sure to rate us on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you're listening to podcasts. Swing by, leave us a nice review. Even just rate us. It helps other people find the podcast, and you don't want to be selfish, right? You want to share us with all your friends.
Yeah, it's nice to share. Share.
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. It sounds like we're at a Cher concert. Share. Subliminal. No, thank you again.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.